They laughed at the quiet cowboy before midnight. By dawn, the same woman would learn silence could carry a man farther than thunder. The painted Coyote Saloon stood under a wash of amber lamplight, its batwing doors breathing dust with every shove, its piano limping through the same tired tune it had played for 20 years. Whiskey, lamp smoke, wet wool, horse sweat. The whole room smelled like a frontier town trying to forget what it was built on. Elias Boone sat alone at the far end of the counter with one hand around a chipped coffee cup and the other resting near a weathered hat gone pale at the brim. He did not drink hard liquor. He did not chase cards. He did not talk unless speech had a purpose. In a place like Dry Creek, men mistook that for weakness. Women sometimes mistook it for pride. Clara Redbird mistook it for something worse. She was the brightest thing in the room without trying to be. Copper skin warmed by lamplight. Dark hair pinned high, though one loose strand kept brushing her cheek whenever she turned too fast. She wore a burgundy saloon dress bought secondhand from a widow in Tucson and altered 3 times by hand to make it last another season. Men called her pretty when they wanted something and difficult when they could not get it. Clara had learned long ago that a woman alone in the territory needed a sharp tongue the way a rider needed water. It kept trouble back one more hour. She came down the bar carrying a tray of glasses and stopped when she saw Elias counting coins beside his coffee. 3 quarters, 2 nickels, 1 penny rubbed nearly smooth. "That all you got, cowboy?" she asked, not loud at first, but the room heard her anyway. It always did. A few men turned on their stools. Someone near the card table snorted. Elias lifted his eyes, calm as Winter Creek water. "Enough for the coffee. Then maybe sip it slower," Clara said. "Would not want Dry Creek remembering you as the man who spent his last coin on something weaker than tea." A laugh broke loose from the piano side of the room. Then another. Elias looked back down at the cup. No anger. No excuse. That made the laughter meaner somehow. Clara hated that she noticed. She set the tray down harder than she meant to, glass tapping wood in a quick, brittle rhythm. Upstairs, just beyond the ceiling boards, a faint sound reached her through the noise below. A child coughing. Thin at first, then longer, tighter. Clara's shoulders stiffened, but only for a breath. She covered it with a half smile and leaned against the bar. "You ever say anything worth hearing, Mr. Boone?" Elias finally answered. "Only when it can still help someone." The room quieted for a beat, as if the air itself had paused. Clara gave a short laugh to kill the feeling. "Then I reckon this town has not had much use for you." "Maybe not," he said. "Town is not the same as people." He stood, slow and steady, and reached for his hat. The lamplight caught something beneath his coat when the fabric shifted. A silver edge, not jewelry, not a gambler's trick, more like a badge or old service pin, gone dull with years. Clara saw it only for a second before it disappeared again. Then the cough came back. Upstairs. Harder now. Hard enough to stop her breath in the middle of her chest. Elias heard it too. His eyes moved toward the ceiling. And for the first time that night, the quiet cowboy looked like a man listening to something the rest of the room had failed to understand. By the time Clara reached the stairs, the laughter downstairs had already turned thin and embarrassed, the way laughter always did after a room realized it had mistaken stillness for surrender. She climbed fast, one hand lifting her skirt clear of the steps, the other gripping the banister polished smooth by years of tired palms. The little room above the saloon was close with heat, camphor, and the stale smell of damp blankets that never fully dried in winter. Noah lay curled on the narrow bed beneath a patched quilt, his small face bright with fever, dark curls stuck to his forehead, each breath catching as though the night itself were sitting on his chest. Clara knelt beside him at once. "Noah." His eyes opened, then drifted. "Mama." It came out as a whisper rubbed thin by pain. She pressed the back of her hand to his brow and felt fear move through her like cold river water. She had seen ordinary fevers. This one did not feel ordinary. His breathing came too fast, then too shallow. One moment a child trying to sleep. The next, a body fighting something unseen. She reached for the jar of willow bark tea on the table, found only the last bitter mouthful, and knew it would not touch whatever this was. Down below, boots shifted, a chair scraped, and then a measured knock sounded at her half-open door. Clara turned, sharp already from worry. Elias Boone stood in the hallway with his hat in one hand and the dim lamplight behind him. He did not step in. He has a hard pull in the chest, he said quietly. How long? Clara rose halfway, anger coming up to hide the fear. Why do you care? His gaze moved to Noah and back to her, steady as before. Because I have heard that kind of breathing in weather like this. She hated that his voice made the room feel less frantic. Hated more that he sounded certain. Since late afternoon, she said. It got worse after sundown. Elias gave a small nod, as if setting pieces in place inside his mind. Any doctor in town? Clara let out one dry laugh. Dr. Mercer left at noon for a ranch south of the wash. He will not be back till morning, maybe later, and Noah does not have later. The words hung there, too blunt to take back. Elias stepped one pace nearer the doorframe. Has the boy had a chill, then heat, then coughing that takes his strength after? Clara stared at him. Yes. Any pain here? He touched 2 fingers to his own ribs. She nodded slowly. He said it hurt when he breathed. Elias looked toward the window where the boards rattled under a new gust of night wind. Cold dust came in with the storm front. Some lungs cannot fight both at once. Clara did not know whether to believe him. What she knew was the shape of his face had changed. He no longer looked like a drifter waiting out the evening. He looked like a man measuring danger by sound. Noah coughed again, harder, small body folding around it. Clara caught him, held him up, murmured into his hair. When the fit passed, Elias said, You need horehound, mustard for a chest plaster, and the white tin bottle Dr. Mercer keeps in his black case. If it is still at his office, the boy has a chance to rest before dawn. Clara looked up. Then go get it. Elias did not move. Mercer locks the office. Then wake the blacksmith, break the lock, do something. I can get in, he said. That is not the hard part. He glanced east, toward the dark rise beyond town. The hard part is Mercer took the key bottle with him yesterday. There is a second supply at Mission Crossing, 14 miles by the Ridge Trail. Clara felt the floor tilt under her. 14 miles at night, through a canyon road, half the town refused after sundown. No one will ride that in this wind. Elias set his hat against his thigh. I will. For a second, she could only look at him. The man she had mocked downstairs. The man everyone had treated like dust on a boot. Why? She asked. His answer came without pride. Because the boy is still breathing. Clara followed Elias back downstairs with Noah's coughing still echoing in her ears, and for the first time the painted coyote felt too bright, too loud, too full of faces that would not help unless helping cost them nothing. The piano had gone silent. Men nursed their drinks and studied the grain of the bar as if wood were suddenly more interesting than shame. Outside, the wind pushed grit against the windows in soft, dry bursts. Elias moved through the room without haste, though there was urgency in everything about him now. He did not announce what he intended. He simply crossed to the back wall where tack hooks and loner lanterns hung, reached for a storm lamp, and checked the fuel by lifting it to the light. Clara stood near the stairs, one hand pressed against her own ribs, still trying to understand how a man so quiet could change the air in a room just by deciding something. You cannot go alone, she said. He turned the wick wheel once, testing the flame. Less weight is faster. That is not what I mean. He studied her for a moment, then set the lamp down and walked to a small side table where ranch hands left gloves, twine, and loose tobacco. From inside his coat, he drew a folded cloth packet and laid it open. A compass. A narrow tin syringe case, empty now, but clean. A strip of faded army blue with threadbare lettering. Clara saw at once that the silver flash she had noticed earlier had not been a badge for show. It was a service insignia worn nearly smooth by time, tucked away like something a man no longer explained. Who are you? She asked before she could stop herself. Elias did not answer quickly. He rolled the compass shut and slipped it back into the cloth. A man who rode for army clinics along the border once, he said. Scouting, delivering medicine, carrying children when wagons could not pass. A chair creaked somewhere behind Clara. One of the card players muttered, Never heard that. Elias gave the room a glance empty of challenge. You never asked. Clara felt the weight of that land where it should. All evening she had shaped him into something small, because small things felt easier to survive beside. But nothing about him felt small now. Not the calm in his hands. Not the fact that he had known Noah's danger by the sound of one breath through a ceiling. Mission Crossing is 14 miles by the main road, she said. Closer to 11 by the ridge cut, Elias replied. If the wash did not slide from last week's rain. And if it did, then it is longer. He took a leather canteen from a peg and tested the strap. Clara stepped closer. I am coming. No, you do not get to tell me no where my son is concerned. His jaw shifted once, not from anger but restraint. If I must turn back to keep you in the saddle, the boy loses time. Clara lifted her chin. I was born in country rougher than this town pretends to fear. That made him look at her differently. Not as a saloon girl with a sharp mouth. As someone hearing another truth under the first one. Apache, he asked softly. She did not answer in words. She did not need to. His face did not harden the way most faces did. It only settled. Then you know what wind does in those cuts. I know, she said. And I know I will not stay here waiting while strangers decide whether my child is worth the ride. Elias reached for the lamp again. The room remained still around them, full of men who had watched Clara pour their drinks for months and still hesitated to meet her eyes. Finally, the barkeep, old Vernon Hale, cleared his throat and set a small sack of coffee beans on the counter. Traded at the mission if needed, he muttered, ashamed to offer so little. Elias nodded once. Clara saw then that help on the frontier rarely arrived clean. Sometimes it came late. Sometimes it came wrapped in guilt. Sometimes it came from the one soul everyone had judged wrong. Saddle up, Elias said, and bring the boy's blanket. Night in the ridge takes heat faster than fear. The livery stable crouched at the far end of Dry Creek like an old mule in bad weather, boards warped, lanterns swinging, the smell of hay and leather thick enough to taste. Elias moved through it with the confidence of a man who had spent more nights around horses than around people. Clara followed close behind, wrapping Noah's wool blanket around her shoulders against the wind that kept threading through the loose planks. Outside, the town had shrunk into pockets of yellow light and long black alleys. Inside, the horses shifted and snorted, picking up the mood of the storm before it fully arrived. Elias stopped before a rangy bay gelding with a white star on his forehead and ran a hand down the animal's neck. This one stays calm in narrow ground, he said. He listens better than most men. Clara would have laughed on any other night. Instead, she reached for the saddle blanket with hands that were colder than she wanted to admit. Elias noticed at once. Without comment, he took the leather cinch from her, fastened it with quick, practiced motions, then checked the bridle twice. Nothing wasted. No show in it. Just care. Clara saddled her own mare, a compact dun she had won in a card settlement 6 months earlier and trusted more than she trusted half the town. When she bent to tighten the strap, the blanket around her slipped, and Elias caught it before it fell into the straw. His hand barely brushed the cloth. Even so, the gesture landed heavier than all the words the men downstairs had not spoken. You should cover your face once we hit the ridge, he said. Dust is finer up there. It gets into the throat and steals water you do not know you are losing. I know how to ride, Boone. He handed the blanket back. I know. There was no challenge in it. Just respect. That unsettled her more than an argument would have. They led the horses into the yard where the wind met them full on, carrying cold grit and the dry smell of mesquite from the flats east of town. Clara looked up toward her room above the saloon windows. A single lamp still burned there. Vernon's wife had gone up to sit with Noah. It was the best they could do. It felt like nowhere near enough. He was fine this morning, Clara said suddenly, almost to herself. He chased a chicken through the alley and came back laughing because he swore it looked angry. Elias adjusted the strap on the medicine satchel he had taken from an empty hook. Children burn bright before they fade. That is why grown folks miss the turn sometimes. She looked at him sharply. Do not talk like he is already leaving. Elias put one boot in the stirrup and paused. I am talking like time matters. They rode out through the sleeping end of town, past shuttered storefronts, the blacksmith's yard, the little church with its leaning steeple, and the dry trough where summer dogs came to lick at memory. The ridge trail started beyond the cemetery, where white markers tilted in the dark and the land rose into cuts of stone and scrub oak. Clara kept her mare close behind Elias's gelding as the path narrowed to a shelf above the wash. Wind pushed at them sideways. Sand hissed against cloth and leather. The world beyond the lantern became shape and guesswork. For a while the only sounds were hooves, tack creaking, and the long breath of the land. Then Elias spoke without turning. Why did you stay in Dry Creek? Clara almost said because a woman with a child did not get many choices worth naming. Instead, she answered the deeper truth. Because it was the first place where no one knew my mother's name. Elias rode in silence for a few beats. And did that help? Clara drew the blanket tighter over her mouth. For a little while. He nodded once, as if that answer fit something he already understood. The trail bent hard around a shoulder of rock. Below them the wash opened like a dark scar across the earth. Ahead, lightning flickered far beyond the hills, white without thunder yet. Elias leaned forward in the saddle, reading the ground the way some men read scripture. From here on, he said, we do not waste any motion. If your mare spooks, give her one rein and your voice. If I say dismount, do it fast. And if I tell you to trust me, do not spend a second thinking about the saloon. Clara stared at his back, at the quiet line of a man the town had treated like dust. Then she looked toward the dark miles ahead and answered with all the fear she had no room left to hide. I already do. The ridge cut narrowed until horse and rider seemed stitched into the same strip of darkness, the path no wider than a wagon plank in places, slanting between stone walls that caught the wind and sharpened it. Clara kept her eyes on the moving lantern at Elias's saddle horn because everything beyond that circle of light felt ready to vanish. Dry brush rattled in hidden pockets. Gravel shifted under hooves and tumbled down into the wash below, where it took too long to hit bottom. Somewhere a night hawk cried once and then went silent. The frontier had a way of sounding empty only when it was full of things watching. Elias rode slightly ahead, not hurried now, but exact, choosing each turn as though he had laid the trail himself. Once, where the path broke across a seam of white stone, he raised one hand without looking back, and Clara reined in at once. What is it? She asked. He slid down from the gelding, crouched beside the ground, and brushed at the dust with his glove. Slide marks, he said. From 2 days ago, maybe 3. Small one. Clara leaned from the saddle, trying to see. Can we pass? Elias studied the rock face above them, then the broken edge below. Yes, one at a time. No talk. Let the horses think. He led his gelding across first, slow and balanced, boots feeling for firm spots, lantern kept low. The light made the cliff look damp, though Clara knew it was only the trick of dust and shadow. When he reached the far side, he turned and held out a hand, not because she needed pulling, but because the horse might need a calm point to move toward. Clara hated how much she appreciated that. She guided the dun forward, breath held, one hoof at a time over stone that sounded hollow under iron. For one terrible instant the mare's hind foot slipped and scraped. Clara's stomach dropped. Then Elias's voice came, low and steady. Easy now. Good girl. You are across already. The mare straightened as if she believed him, and then they were past. Clara let out a breath that had been hurting her chest. Elias remounted and took the lead again. You have done this trail before, she said. Many times. As a scout. As whatever the day required. His answer did not invite more, but the storm and the darkness had already stripped too much pretending from the night. What made you stop? She asked. He was quiet long enough that she thought he would leave it there. A girl at Fort Lowell, he said at last. 7 years old. Pneumonia after a dust front. We got medicine, but not soon enough. Clara's fingers tightened on the reins. Was she yours? No, a pause. Might as well have been. Nothing else followed, yet the space after those words felt fuller than confession. Clara saw it then, not as a grand tragedy told for pity, but as the plain shape of what could break a man and still leave him walking. The lantern flame dipped under a fresh gust. Elias cupped it with one hand, and the movement pulled his coat aside enough for Clara to see the little silver insignia again, the worn edge, the care with which he kept it hidden. That is why you knew Noah's breathing, she said. Elias nodded once. Some sounds stay with you. They rode on. The ridge widened into a stretch of pinyon and low cedar where the ground softened and the wind changed direction. Clara pulled the blanket down from her mouth for a moment and tasted rain somewhere far off. Not here yet, but moving. When I came to Dry Creek, she said, surprising herself, I told people my husband died in New Mexico. Elias glanced back. Did he? No, the truth felt strange in the cold. He left before Noah could remember his face. I kept the widow story because men respect grief more than abandonment. Elias considered that without judgment. Men respect what lets them feel comfortable. Clara looked ahead at the dark road unwinding. Under the lantern light, you say things like you have been studying us. "No," he said. "Just surviving near us." Up ahead the trail dropped toward a fork where one branch ran south to the main road and the other cut west through a stand of cottonwoods toward Mission Crossing. Elias slowed, head lifted slightly, listening. Clara heard it a moment later. Not thunder. Hoofbeats. Faint, somewhere beyond the trees. Elias turned in the saddle, and for the first time all night his voice sharpened. Lantern out. Darkness folded over them the instant Elias pinched the lantern wick, leaving only the pale wash of clouded starlight and the shapes their horses made against it. Clara's eyes strained into the cottonwoods where the other trail bent away, the hoofbeats coming clearer now, then slowing, then stopping altogether. The silence that followed felt planned. Elias guided his gelding off the path into a pocket of shadow beneath two low branches and motioned Clara beside him. The horses sensed the change and stood tight, ears flicking toward the road. Clara leaned in and whispered, "Who is it?" Elias kept his gaze outward. Could be ranch hands. Could be men moving whiskey north. Could be no trouble at all. That does not sound like no trouble at all. It sounds like night in territory country. She wanted to ask how he could be so calm, but she had begun to understand that his calm was not the absence of fear. It was discipline laid over fear like a blanket over a shaking child. The hoofbeats resumed, this time crossing the fork at a walk. 3 riders, maybe 4. Clara could make out only shifting silhouettes and the dull flash of moonlight on hat brims. One of the men coughed. Another spat. Their voices carried in pieces on the wind, too broken to make out more than tone. Tired. Irritated. Not searching. Elias waited until the sound thinned and disappeared southward before relighting the lantern with a protected match. The small flame returned like a held breath. "You carry trouble lightly," Clara said. "No," Elias replied. "I carry it quietly." They pressed on through the cottonwoods, branches scratching its leaves turned silver underneath by the restless sky. At the edge of the grove stood an abandoned line shack half buried in tumbleweed, roof sagging, one door hanging by a hinge. Elias slowed and looked toward it. "We stopped 2 minutes," he said. "Not 3. Clara frowned. "Why?" He dismounted already. "Because horses breathe better after fear if you let them." He disappeared inside the shack and came back with an old water barrel and a cracked basin tucked under one arm. There was still a little rainwater settled in the bottom, stale but clean enough for the horses. Clara slid down from her mare and watched him work in the dim light, efficient as ever, not a drop wasted. "You really have done this your whole life?" she said. Elias rested a hand on the gelding's neck while the horse drank. "Most of it. And yet you ended up alone in a saloon, letting strangers laugh at you." The question slipped out harsher than she intended. He did not flinch. Sometimes being underestimated is cheaper than explaining yourself. Clara looked away first. The wind had eased for the moment, and in that brief softness the smell of wet earth rose stronger from the west. Mission Crossing could not be much farther now. She found herself studying him in the lantern glow with a different kind of attention. The hardware at his cuffs. The line near his mouth that deepened when he was thinking. The way gentleness showed in him only through actions, never performance. "Why Dry Creek?" she asked. "Why there of all places?" Elias rinsed the basin once and set it aside. "I was looking for somewhere people did not ask questions if a man kept to himself." Clara gave him a faint, tired smile. "And did that help?" He looked at her then, and there was something close to humor in his eyes for the first time. For a little while. She almost smiled back, but Noah's face came to her at once, too hot against the pillow, lips dry, breath too fast. The warmth vanished. Elias saw it happen. "He is holding," he said. "How can you know?" "Because boys like that hold longer than fear says they will." It was not a promise, yet it steadied her more than one. They mounted again and rode the last stretch toward Mission Crossing as the clouds lowered and the first small drops of rain began to strike the dust, leaving dark pinpricks on the ground that vanished almost as soon as they appeared. At last a mission bell rose out of the dark ahead, followed by the squared shape of adobe walls and a lantern burning under the eaves. Clara felt hope and dread arrive together. One meant the medicine might be here. The other meant she was close enough now to lose everything. Elias rode up to the gate, swung down, and knocked 3 times with the brass ring. A long pause followed, then steps. A bolt drawn back. The door opened a hand's width, and an older friar peered out, eyes narrowing at the weathered pair before him. Elias removed his hat. "Brother Mateo," he said, "I need Dr. Mercer's reserve case." The friar's face changed from caution to recognition in one startled beat. "Elias Boone," he murmured. "Lord above, I thought you were dead." Brother Mateo opened the gate wider without another word and led them into the mission yard where rain began to darken the packed earth in scattered coins. The adobe walls held a little warmth, enough for Clara to notice how hard the ride had cut through her nerves. Lantern lights spread across the chapel door, the cistern, the low infirmary wing, and a row of sleeping swallows tucked beneath the eaves, all of it quiet in the way holy places often were, as if fear had to lower its voice before entering. Elias tied the horses near the porch and followed the friar inside. Clara stayed one step behind, unwilling to let the medicine out of sight, even for a breath. The mission infirmary smelled of soap, dried herbs, old paper, and the faint sting of spirits from bottles lined in neat rows along a shelf. Brother Mateo moved quickly for an older man, taking down a locked iron box from a cabinet and setting it on the table. "Mercer leaves reserve stock only for emergencies," he said, fingers searching his belt for a key. "If this is not one, then I no longer know the meaning of the word." The lid opened with a metallic click. Inside lay folded bandages, 2 stoppered glass bottles, a small paper packet of mustard powder, horehound drops, and a white tin vial wrapped in cloth. Elias reached for the vial, but did not touch it at once. He read the faded label in silence, then looked up. "This is the one." Clara stepped closer. "Will it help him?" Brother Mateo answered before Elias could. "If the boy still has strength, it may ease the lungs enough for rest." May ease. Words too fragile for the size of her fear. She gripped the back of a chair until the wood pressed into her palm. Elias gathered the medicines into the satchel with the same care he had shown the lantern, the horses, the trail. Nothing rushed, though every second mattered. "You need hot water when you return," he said to Clara. "Mustard plaster over the chest, not too long, or it will burn his skin. Then 3 drops from the vial in warm water. Only 3, no more." She stared at him. "You remember all that from years ago?" Elias tied the satchel shut. Some things do not leave. Brother Mateo had been watching him with an expression Clara could not yet name. Not surprise alone. Something like sorrow mixed with respect. "You should have stayed in this work," the friar said quietly. Elias's hands paused on the leather strap. "Maybe. Those children at the border post still ask after the rider with the soft voice and the stubborn horse." Clara turned toward him. "Children." Brother Mateo looked from Elias to her, weighing whether the story belonged to him. He brought medicine where wagons would not go, sat with the sick when fathers could not bear the sound, buried none with empty hands. Elias did not lift his head. "Brother." The warning in that single word was gentle but firm. Brother Mateo inclined his head and let the matter rest. Clara felt shame rise through her again, deeper now because it had shape. She had mocked a man for seeming small when his silence had been carrying grief and service both. Before she could speak, a burst of wind shoved rain against the shutters, harder now, and Brother Mateo moved to the window. "If you leave by the cottonwoods, the wash may take you," he said. "The low road floods first." Elias stepped beside him, looked once at the sky beyond the slats, and made his choice at once. "We go back by Juniper Spine." Clara frowned. "That ridge is steeper. And higher." Brother Mateo nodded reluctantly. "Faster, if the horses hold." Clara felt dread settle cold in her stomach. The ride there had already scraped every nerve raw. The thought of returning by a harsher trail with rain coming on made the room tilt around the edges. Elias seemed to read it in her face. "Look at me," he said. She did. "You asked me to save your son. That ride starts now, not when we feel ready." Clara swallowed and gave one tight nod. Elias handed her the satchel. "Then keep that close as your own heartbeat." They left Mission crossing under a sky that had lost its stars, the clouds now hanging low enough to make the ridgelines disappear. Rain came and went in thin sheets. Not yet a storm, but no longer a threat either. The earth changed underhoof within minutes, dust turning slick where clay ran near the surface, stones shining dark as old iron. Elias kept them on the higher spine west of the Mission, a narrow trail that climbed through juniper and bare rock, then ran along a broken crest above the main wash. The wind had shifted behind them, colder now, urging them on. Clara rode with the satchel strapped across her chest beneath the blanket, one hand touching it every few minutes, as if her fingers alone could guard what mattered inside. Below them, somewhere unseen, water began to move in the low places, first as a hush, then as a running sound that grew with every mile. "How long?" she asked. "If the ridge holds, 3 hours," Elias replied. "If it does not, longer." She let out a tired breath that almost became a laugh. "You have a gift for comfort." "No," he said, "just timing." For a while they rode without speaking. The trail demanded it. Juniper branches clawed its leaves. Loose shale shifted under the horses, and more than once Elias dismounted to lead them over stretches too sharp or narrow for speed. Clara followed every instruction now without resistance, not because fear had made her obedient, but because trust had stopped feeling like surrender. At the top of one rise they paused to let the horses breathe. From there Clara could see the faint lanterns of distant ranch houses far across the flats, each one small and steady against the dark. It struck her then how many lives were going on in those quiet squares of light while Noah fought for breath above a saloon room. The world never slowed for one child's fever. It only revealed who would ride into the dark anyway. "Why did Brother Mateo think you were dead?" she asked. Elias stood beside his gelding, rain stippling the brim of his hat. "Because I gave people reason to think so." "That sounds like a story." "It is." And he took a moment before answering. There was a winter camp east of the San Pedro. Influenza moving through children faster than supplies. I rode out with medicine for 6 cabins. Reached 5. Clara waited. The rain tapped lightly on the saddle leather. "The 6th had a little boy," Elias said. "About Noah's age." His voice did not break. It did something worse. It thinned. Snow trapped us. I stayed until morning, but morning was too late. After that, I stopped believing being needed was the same as being useful. Clara felt the words strike somewhere tender she kept hidden even from herself. "So you buried yourself in a town where no one would ask for anything important." "That was the idea. And yet here you are." Elias looked out over the dark ridge. Some promises do not care what a man decides about himself. Clara thought of the mockery at the saloon, of the way he had answered none of it, of the child upstairs fighting for each breath. "I said cruel things to you," she said. "Yes." The quiet honesty of it made her flinch. "I do not have a good excuse." "No." Rain gathered at the edge of his jaw and fell. He finally looked at her. "But you had a frightened one." Frontier people often dress fear in mean clothes. Clara lowered her eyes. No preacher in Dry Creek had ever put the truth to her so plainly. A crack of distant thunder rolled at last from the west. Elias turned at once. "Mount up." They rode hard along the next stretch, the horses stretching into a ground-eating pace where the ridge allowed it. At the far end the trail dipped between 2 boulders and opened onto a narrow saddle above a black drop. Water flashed below, sudden and angry, filling the wash faster than it had any right to. Clara felt the mare bunch beneath her. Elias raised his hand. "Do not look down," he said. "Look at the back of my coat and keep it there." She did, because by then his coat had become more than cloth in the rain. It had become the line between panic and motion, between losing time and getting home. The worst stretch of Juniper spine began where the ridge pinched into a bare shelf of pale stone, exposed on one side to the wind and on the other to a drop that swallowed even the sound of falling gravel. Rain had polished the rock to a dark sheen. Elias swung down without hesitation and shortened the gelding's reins, leading him by the bit. Clara copied him, boots landing in cold mud and then on slick stone. The horses were nervous now, heads high, nostrils open, but still listening. That was enough. "One step at a time," Elias said. "No sudden pull. Let them feel the ground." Clara nodded. Though her pulse was beating so hard, she could hear it over the water below. The satchel thudded lightly against her chest with each step, a small steady weight that reminded her why fear had no authority here. Halfway across the shelf, the mare's forelegs skidded and struck sparks off stone. Clara gasped and caught the rein too sharply. The mare tossed her head, frightened more by Clara's fear than by the footing itself. In the next second Elias was beside them, one hand on the cheek strap, the other flat against the mare's neck, his voice low and even. "Easy now. You are all right. Feel me here. Easy." The horse shuddered once, then settled, ears turning toward him as if he were the only solid thing on the mountain. Clara swallowed against the burn in her throat. I almost lost her. Elias did not let go yet. No, you almost frightened her into forgetting her feet. The correction was sharp, but not cruel. It was truth made useful. Clara drew a breath, steadied her own hands, and tried again. Thank you. Save it for the boy. They finished the crossing without another slip. On the far side, the trail descended into a notch sheltered by rock walls and twisted cedar roots. The rain eased there, leaving only drips from branches and the loud rush of floodwater somewhere lower in the dark. Elias checked the cinch on Clara's saddle, then looked at the sky through the break in the stone. We cut south now, he said. If the cemetery road is still passable, we make town before first light. If. She almost smiled despite everything. It felt strange, smiling in a night that had held so much fear, but perhaps that was what relief looked like before it fully trusted itself. They mounted again and descended through the notch into country Clara knew better. A dead cottonwood split by lightning. A line of stone that looked like kneeling cattle. The old prospect pit no one used anymore. Dry Creek lay somewhere beyond the next two ridges, hidden still, but near enough for memory to recognize the land. Elias, she said after a time, his name easier now than Boone had been. He glanced back. When Noah is well, I will repay you. No, you have not even heard what I can offer. No, he repeated. Then tell me what kind of man rides 11 miles in rain for a child and asks nothing. He looked ahead before answering. The kind who once needed someone else to do the same. She held that in silence. The frontier liked to pretend men were made from grit alone, but that was never the truth. They were made from what mercy had reached them and what mercy had missed. Ahead, the clouds began to pale at their edges, not with sunrise yet, but with the promise that night was thinning. Then Clara saw it. A faint orange glow low on the horizon where Dry Creek should have been. Too bright for dawn, too restless for lamps. Elias. He had seen it too. The set of his shoulders changed at once. Fire, she whispered. He listened, then shook his head. Not spreading. Too still. Likely bonfires at the churchyard or the street. At this hour? A town gathers strange when a child is dying and nobody wants to say they were afraid. Clara felt the truth of that all through her. Dry Creek, which had done so little when help first mattered, might now be waking to witness the return so it could call itself concerned. Bitterness rose, hot and familiar. Then Noah's face came back to her and burned the bitterness away. There would be time later for judgment. For now there was only the road, the medicine, the boy. Elias nudged the gelding forward into a faster pace. Stay close, he said. We are almost where hope gets dangerous. Dry Creek came into view just before dawn, gathered in the hollow like a handful of dark cards on a gray table. But the town was not asleep. Lanterns burned along the main street, and in the churchyard beyond it, their light trembling in the damp air. A small crowd stood outside the Painted Coyote and spilled across the porch, hats in hand, voices low. Someone had lit 2 fire barrels against the chill, and their smoke climbed straight upward now that the wind had finally eased. Clara saw Vernon first, then his wife, then men from the card table, the blacksmith, the seamstress, even the grocer who never opened his mouth for anyone without payment. They turned as one when Elias and Clara rode in from the cemetery road, both horses wet, both riders streaked with dust and rain. No one cheered. No one asked foolish questions. It was too close to morning, too close to loss for that. Clara was off her mare before it fully stopped moving. How is he? She asked. Vernon's wife met her at the porch steps, eyes red from the long night. Still here, she whispered. But only just. Clara ran upstairs with the satchel clutched to her chest. Behind her, she heard Elias giving calm instructions even before he reached the landing. Boil water now. Clean kettle. Fresh cloth. No crowding the room. Men who had laughed at him hours earlier moved at once. The room above the saloon felt smaller than before, crowded now with fear, heat, and the rough tenderness of people trying too late to become useful. Noah lay where she had left him, but his breathing was worse. Each inhale shallow and catching, his lips dry, his cheeks too bright. Clara's heart nearly gave way at the sight. Elias entered behind her, removed his coat, washed his hands in the basin brought up by the seamstress, and became someone else entirely. Not louder, not harder, only more certain. He checked Noah's brow, listened at his chest with one ear lowered, mixed the drops in warm water with exact care, and spoke to the boy in the same voice he had used for the frightened mare on the ridge. "That is right, son. Easy now. Small swallow." Then another. Noah obeyed as if the voice had found him somewhere inside the fever where Clara herself could no longer reach. Clara held her son upright, while Elias measured the second sip and then the third. Afterward, he prepared the mustard plaster and wrapped it in cloth before laying it over Noah's chest for only a short while, watching the child's face every second. The room fell so quiet that the little sounds mattered. The click of the spoon against the cup, the hiss from the stove below, the soft rasp of Noah's breathing. Minutes passed, then more. Clara dared not ask anything, because naming hope too soon felt like breaking glass. Finally, Noah's breaths lengthened. Still weak, still hard-won, but deeper now, less frantic. The terrible catching eased. His fingers, which had been clenched in the blanket, loosened one by one. Elias looked at Clara, and for the first time all night, there was something like relief in his face. "There," he said softly. He found the turn. Clara stared at her son as tears rose before she could stop them. Noah's eyes fluttered open. "Mama, I am here," she whispered, bending over him. "I am right here." He looked past her shoulder at Elias. "Cowboy." Elias gave the smallest nod. Noah's mouth moved in a ghost of a smile before sleep finally took him. Not the hard fever sleep from before, but the first true rest of the night. Clara sat back slowly, one hand over her mouth, the other still on Noah's blanket. Around them, the people of Dry Creek remained still in the doorway and on the stairs, witnesses now to something none of them could claim. The quiet man they had overlooked. The boy still breathing. The mother learning, in the gray hour before sunrise, that dignity sometimes arrived wearing dust, speaking softly, and asking for nothing at all. Morning came softly over Dry Creek, not with triumph, but with the pale, careful light that follows a night people do not wish to speak too loudly about. The rain had passed east. Water still dripped from porch roofs, and the street was dark with mud where wagon tracks had filled and settled. Upstairs in the little room above the saloon, Noah slept through his first full hour without the hard scraping breath that had nearly taken him. His fever had not vanished, but it had broken enough for the child's face to look like a child's again. Clara sat beside the bed, one hand on the quilt, as though even sleep might slip away if she did not anchor it with touch. Elias stood near the window, cleaning the spoon and cup with slow, exact movements before setting them to dry on a folded cloth. He had not tried to leave. He had not tried to claim anything either. He simply remained until remaining was no longer needed. From below came the faint sounds of a town waking to itself. Boots in the mud, a wagon axle, someone sweeping out a storefront, the church bell marking the hour in a tone made softer by damp air. Clara looked at Noah, then at Elias. The night had stripped something from both of them. Pride from her, perhaps. Distance from him. In its place sat a quieter thing neither could name yet. "You should rest," she said. Elias gave a small shake of the head. "When the fever turns again, it may do it fast. Better to watch one more hour." Clara lowered her eyes. "You speak like a man who expects trouble even from daylight." "Daylight hides less," he answered. "That does not make it kind." She almost smiled. Instead, she rose and crossed to the washstand, pouring a little clean water into a basin. "Then at least sit down while you mistrust the morning." This time he did smile, barely. It changed his face more than she would have guessed. Not by making him handsome in the easy way, by making him look younger than sorrow had allowed. He sat in the straight-back chair near the stove, hat in his lap, shirt sleeves rolled once from when he had mixed the medicine. Clara noticed then how tired he truly was. Not only from the ride. The sort of tired that comes from carrying a life in careful hands too many times and never deciding whether it counts as burden or purpose. "Brother Mateo knew you well," she said. Elias looked at the floorboards for a moment before answering. "Well enough." He spoke as though children remembered you. Children remember whoever arrives when adults have started speaking in whispers. Clara let that settle. Outside the room, footsteps gathered on the landing. Vernon knocked once, then opened the door a little. "Town council's downstairs," he said, hat turning in his hands. "They heard the boy is resting." Clara frowned. "And?" Vernon glanced toward Elias, then back to Clara. "And they would like a word. With both of you." She almost refused on instinct. Dry Creek had found its conscience late enough to insult the name of conscience itself. Get something in. Vernon's face stopped her. Not authority. Shame again. Shame trying to become usefulness. Elias rose before she could answer. I will go. Clara turned. It concerns my son. No, Elias said gently. It concerns what the town did before your son needed help. The truth of that went through her clean as cold water. She looked at Noah one more time, at the calmer rise and fall of his chest, then drew herself upright. Then they can speak to both of us. They went downstairs together. The saloon looked different by morning. Meaner details always shrank in daylight. The scarred bar, the stained mirror, the card table where men had laughed too quickly at a quiet stranger. By the front windows stood 3 councilmen in Sunday coats they had put on too early, as if formality might make them respectable. Beside them waited the blacksmith, the grocer, Vernon, and 2 women from the church sewing circle. Clara saw at once that the gathering was not about Noah's medicine. It was about witness, about who had seen what the night revealed and what would now be done with it. The oldest councilman cleared his throat. Miss Redbird, Mr. Boone, we have come to offer, he faltered, because some words arrived too late to fit the mouth. Clara looked at Elias. He stood beside her in the same stillness he had worn the first time she mocked him. Only now the whole room seemed arranged around that stillness instead of against it. And for once, Dry Creek knew it. No one in the room seemed eager to be the first man honest enough to speak plainly. The councilmen shifted their hats from hand to hand, each waiting for another to name what everyone already knew. Clara had seen this before in frontier towns. Men loved judgment when it cost them nothing and hated truth when it asked them to stand inside it. The oldest councilman, Ezra Pike, finally managed a formal cough and tried again. Miss Redbird, Mr. Boone, the town wishes to express gratitude for the boy's recovery and also regret for any misapprehension shown last night. Elias said nothing. Clara almost did. Then she realized silence would make them hear themselves more clearly than anger would. Ezra glanced toward the others, found no rescue there, and pressed on. It has been suggested that Dry Creek establish a proper emergency fund for medicine and riding fees, so no family is left waiting on chance again. At that, Vernon's wife gave a short nod from the side of the room. The blacksmith stared at his boots. A few months earlier, Clara would have taken the offer as victory. This morning it felt smaller than it should have. Necessary, yes. Enough, no. Suggested by whom? She asked. Ezra blinked. By several of us. Clara's gaze moved over the room until it landed on the church women, who did not look away. Then on Vernon's wife. Then on the blacksmith's daughter near the stairs. It was not the council that had been moved first. It was the people who knew what fear cost when carried alone. Then do it, Clara said. Do not speak of it like a storm you may or may not prepare for. Do it before the next child gives you less time. Ezra swallowed and nodded. Yes, of course. Another councilman stepped forward, younger, careful with his voice. And as for Mr. Boone, we understand a debt is owed. Clara felt the whole room lean toward that sentence. Debt. Money. The frontier always tried to turn moral failure into bookkeeping. Elias spared them all the trouble. No debt, he said. The younger man frowned. Sir, the town can compensate the ride, the supplies, the night's hazard. No debt, Elias repeated. What was needed has already been paid. The room fell still. Clara knew what he meant before anyone else did. Trust. The one thing she had finally given him on the mountain. Too late to be graceful, but not too late to matter. Ezra Pike opened his mouth, then closed it again. Clara stepped forward before the silence could curdle back into cowardice. Then perhaps the town owes something else, she said. Every eye turned toward her. She could feel the old reflex in herself, the one that sharpened words into knives to keep dignity from being taken. But this did not need a knife. It needed a plain truth said without decoration. Last night, I mocked a man who had done me no harm, she said. Many of you laughed because it felt easier than seeing him. Then my son could not breathe, and the only person in Dry Creek who knew what to do was the one we had all already decided did not matter. That is what happened. Not bad luck. Not misunderstanding. Pride. She heard someone shift uncomfortably near the back. Let them. So if this town wants to repay anything, Clara went on, begin by learning the difference between a quiet man and a useless one. Begin by learning the difference between being poor and being small. Begin by remembering who rode out when all of you were still deciding whether the road was worth the risk. No one interrupted. Even the piano seemed to have gone respectful in the corner. Clara turned then, not to the council, but to Elias himself. He stood with his hat low against his thigh, eyes steady, as though he had weathered many rooms like this and expected nothing from any of them. Her voice softened. "You saved my son." It was not a grand declaration. It was smaller than that, better than that. A sentence with no place to hide. Elias inclined his head once. He saved himself too. He held on. Clara looked at him a long moment. Then perhaps both things can be true. Sunlight, thin and new, touched the front window just then and laid a pale stripe across the floorboards between them. Outside, wagons began to move through town, ordinary life returning with its usual indifference. But inside the Painted Coyote, something had shifted that would not easily shift back. Dry Creek had seen the measure of one man and the failure of many. No speech from the council could unmake that. No money could tidy it. The best the town could do now was remember, and perhaps, in remembering, become less mean than it had been the night before. By late afternoon, Noah was sitting up against his pillow with a cup of broth held in both hands, his face still pale, but his eyes clear enough to follow every sound in the room. Children returned from illness in strange little pieces. First the breath, then the voice, then appetite, then mischief, if mercy intended to stay. Clara watched each small sign arrive as though it were a gift she had no right to touch too quickly. Elias remained through the noon hour and most of the afternoon, measuring the medicine, checking the fever, keeping Noah from trying to rise before strength had truly returned. He moved about the room with the same unclaimed competence that had carried them through the night. No pose in it, no lesson, just care. At one point Noah studied him over the rim of the cup and asked, "Are you a doctor or a cowboy?" Clara nearly laughed for the first time in 2 days. Elias considered the question seriously. "Today I was a writer with medicine." Noah nodded, satisfied, because children are kinder than adults about allowing a man to be exactly what the day required. Near sundown the room warmed gold with western light. Clara stood by the window watching it stripe the rooftops and mud street below, turning even Dry Creek almost beautiful if you did not look too closely. When she turned back, Elias was buttoning his coat. The sight hit her more sharply than she expected. "You are leaving." He settled his hat on his head. "The boy will sleep through the night now. Fever may linger, but the danger has turned." Clara heard the truth in it, heard also the quiet finality. "You could stay for supper," she said. "Vernon's wife sent stew." Elias smiled a little. "That is kind." "It is not kindness," Clara answered before she could stop herself. "It is the least owed." He paused at that, then crossed to the bed and rested 2 fingers lightly against Noah's forehead one last time. "No more night air for a day or 2, he told the boy. "And listen to your mother, even when she sounds strict." Noah gave him a solemn nod worthy of a courthouse promise. Elias straightened. Clara walked with him down the stairs, through the quieter saloon, and onto the porch where evening had begun to gather blue at the edges of the street. A few townspeople glanced over from the mercantile and the pump. None called out. Respect had finally taught them silence. The bay gelding stood tied to the post, brushed down and saddled by some anonymous hand in town who had found a small decent thing to do without being seen doing it. Elias untied the reins and checked the cinch. Clara stood beside him with both hands clasped, searching for words that did not sound smaller than what she meant. "Where will you go?" she asked. "West for a spell. There is ranch work near the river this time of year." And after that, he looked at the horizon as if the horizon had always been his only fixed address. After that, wherever the road is honest. Clara let out a breath that trembled at the edges. "I was wrong about you." Elias turned back toward her. "Yes." There was no cruelty in the answer, only room for the truth to stand upright. She nodded, accepting the sting of it because it was earned. "I was wrong about myself too." That seemed to reach him more deeply than apology had. The line of his face softened. "People often are," he said. "The good ones notice." She almost told him then that he had done more than save a child. He had restored something in her she had been defending so hard she barely remembered how it should feel. But some things, once spoken, lose strength. So Clara did not crowd the moment with all it could carry. Instead, she stepped forward and held out Noah's small red scarf. the one that had ridden tucked beneath the medicine satchel all through the storm. You forgot this. Elias took it, though they both knew he had not forgotten anything. His fingers closed around the bright cloth, and for a beat neither moved. Then he mounted the gelding and settled easy into the saddle, as if horse and man had been made from the same old patience. Clara looked up at him in the falling light. Dry Creek will remember you now, she said. Elias glanced once toward the town, then back to her. Maybe, he answered, but it is better if the next quiet man does not have to earn being seen. He tipped his hat, touched his heels lightly to the gelding, and rode west down the muddy street, while sunset turned the puddles to copper. Clara stood on the porch until horse and rider were only shape, then shadow, then gone. She did not feel abandoned. She felt instructed by something gentler than regret. Out on that wide evening land, justice had not raised its voice. It had simply ridden in, done what mercy asked, and left the town looking at itself in clearer light.